to talk about games, played by Ryan and Mike. A modern, a retro video game show. Yes, we talk about games and sometimes other stuff, like Star Trek. It's a blast, our gaming podcast.
Hello and welcome to another Talk About Games.
How's it going?
How's it going? This is a very exciting episode for me. I'm Ryan.
I'm Mike. And a long time ago, we did a video about this guy here. This is my Analogue NT, which is a very cool system because, you know, as you guys know or should know by now, I like to play my retro games on retro television sets. Now, everybody doesn't feel the same way as I do, and that's fine. A lot of people are fine with, HDMI, HD. That's fine. But what was cool about this is it had RGB, component, S-video, composite, and all these different outputs, so that you could put this on a BVM, PVM, on an old consumer level CRT and all that. And but this is, I'm just feeling the weight of this. This thing is heavy, and I think this was the more expensive model of the Analogue NT. I'm pretty sure there was another model of it that didn't have quite so many outputs. And I know for a fact they had a model of the Super NT, the Super Nintendo one, that did not have the component and RGB outs and all that. And Ryan and I, throughout the years on our old Talk About Games show, we had the conversation over and over again because all these mini consoles would come out, and I always had the same opinion on all of them. And I almost hated doing those because I felt like I offered nothing new to those videos because I always said the same thing. I like to play the games on the retro televisions, and the mini consoles are great for the majority of people. The majority of people don't really care that much. They just want to play a little bit of Mario 3 or something like that and hook it up to their television that they already own and make it an easy experience. And I understand that. But I'm a little bit more into this world because, I do this every day. I stream on Twitch and everything. And I'm more of a sort of also a hobbyist about it. So having the best display for the games is important to me, along with the games themselves. So anyway, they have a new device that they came out with here, and this is called the.
So, we were lucky. I got contacted by Analogue, and Analogue said, the Analogue Pocket is coming out. Would you like to have a review copy? Mm-hmm. And these were really hard to get. They sold out pretty quickly. I tried to get one the day of. I missed it, and I was like, boy, would I ever like to get an Analogue Pocket.
And it's cool. It plays Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and it has these different options and a bunch of other things. And it has options to where, with a real Game Boy, it almost has that green look. Well, you can make it look black and white, but you can also actually make it look green, and it has all these sort of color options that's pretty neat.
So I think as a continuation of what Analogue did with the NT Mini, so Mike was talking about how we reviewed all of these other consoles. The early Nintendo on a chip, like the clones. Then it went to emulation-based consoles, like the Retron 5. Mm-hmm. And we hated that Retron 5 so much, I sawed it in half. Remember that video?
That thing's a piece of shit. And that is like one of the worst control, whatever. I could rant about that.
So then it came to, if you don't have the original console, and you don't have a PVM, a BVM, a CRT, you don't have modded consoles, you don't have all of that stuff, how do you play games authentically?
I want to jump back in time a little bit because my opinions, a lot of technology has come out over the last 10 years or so, and things are different now from like when I was in college compared to now. Like back then, emulation and everything. It was a different world then.
Yeah.
And back then, or even when we started, doing videos in like 2006, 2007, all that, at that point, like I wanted everything to pretty much be authentic and original. Like it had to be the real cartridge and everything. And I think I had more reason for that back then, because when I'd use a lot of these like clone consoles or some emulators back then, I think they've gotten better since. A lot of times I'd experience a lot of lag, and Ryan just mentioned the Retron 5 or any of those Retrons. Those things are so laggy, and little bit later I started more and more getting introduced to the FPGA, which I have felt totally fine with. Now I have EverDrives for NES, Genesis, Super Nintendo, all that stuff. FPGA to me feels like playing a real cartridge, and I'm fine with that. My problem had always been prior to that. It was with the lag, really. But when I use my EverDrives, it's like playing. When I can go back and forth. I can put the real cartridge in, and then I put that in. You can't tell the difference. It's like the same thing.
Clone consoles sucked. Emulation sucked. We have two problems, right? Problem number one we have modern TVs that make our retro games look like shit.
Yeah.
We have upscalers and things that introduce lag, that introduce problems. We want to have the best experience. We want it to be lag-free. We want our experience to be authentic, right? And there's a lot of different ways to get there, but there's always compromises, right? So, so on the one hand, it's like I want to have a classic console on a beautiful CRT that has the best possible cables and the best possible experience, right? Okay, that's one way to go.
Sure.
What's the other way to go? And for a while, the answer was have a poor experience.
Right.
Whether it's
with those what were those old consoles called? Those like
the retro bit,
all those retro bit, and there was another, I can't remember the name of all those. For a while there was those shitty. I wish I could remember the name of it, but there was like a Genesis one.
Like, remember the Generation Next? It was like that, like it looked like a Nintendo, but it was like And some of them had like IR controller, like it was really bad.
And I remember the early like Retron, like the Retron like 3 and stuff, and it's just like all that stuff. There was a lot of shitty like clone consoles. And
it can't play Castlevania 3. It plays the game too fast. It plays the game too slow. It has input lag.
I remember another thing at games was the one I was thinking of, and that thing was a fucking piece of shit. Well, I mean, what was cool is that you could put the original cartridge in, which is fine, but one thing I remember that fucking sucked is it had controllers, and the controllers were infrared.
Yeah.
And dude, if there was like this in front of the console, it wasn't gonna interact. Like you had to be like right fucking with it. It sucked. It was a shit. Now we have like 8-bit do controllers and everything which are like way better. But
so then Analogue puts out the NT Mini. Or they put out the original Analogue NT or the NT Mini or any of these, and they say, okay, we want to be compatible with all the games. We want it to feel like it felt when you played on the real system, but we want to be able to do it on our HD TV. We want to be able to do it with all of these options. We want save states. We want it to be the original experience, but better, uncompromised, right? And with the NT Mini, they said, we want to do it, and we want you to be able to do it on the old TVs too, on top of all that. It's expensive, but you're paying for that quality, right? And how do they do it? They say, well, we can't use emulation because emulation is going to introduce problems with sound, introduce problems with lag, introduce problems with everything. So what do we need to do?
Well,
we need to physically emulate the circuit in the hardware. We need the cartridge, when it's plugged into that circuit, to not know the difference. We want the player to not know the difference. So what do we need? We need an FPGA.
Sure.
We don't need a programmer, although programmers are involved. We need an electrical engineer, someone who understands at the electronic level what an NES was, the path that the electrons took in that board. It has to be as close to that as possible.
So in our old video that we did, there was a line that Ryan said, something about electrons moving through reality, and it became a bit of a meme on Twitter and whatnot, and in the YouTube comments, and be like, haha, electrons move through reality, Ryan. Like, sure, right? And so I'm not a tech guy. I know some tech stuff, but I don't claim to know really much of anything. But I don't even honestly understand what people what the problem with the statement was. Because honestly, when you said that, I was like just kind of over my head. I was just like listening, but I actually don't know what you were talking about. And
which is fine.
Yeah.
And when Analogue sent over the Pocket, and they're like, right on the website for this thing, it says no emulation. Well, then how's it play the game?
Right.
What does that mean? No emulation. Does that mean that there's actually a Game Boy in here or a Game Boy Advance in here? The answer is no, but the answer is also kind of yes. So there's a chip in here, FPGA. FPGA stands for Field Programmable Gate Array.
Okay.
Computers are made up of logic gates. Okay? They're made up of transistors that form math, basically circuits that do math, circuits that can compute the answers to logical questions. Is this value true or false? Is this yes or no, up or down? And you string those gates together, and you start having a physical program, a program that is built from the flow of electricity.
Okay.
Okay? And as those circuits get more and more complicated, they form things like computers, things like memory to store programs, things like things that can compute answers to useful questions, to problems.
Right.
Right? Now imagine if instead of that circuit always being the same, I could run software to make a circuit change its physical form. Okay? So sometimes it calculates, it adds things together. Oh, well, this version subtracts things. Oh, this version does something different.
Okay.
Now imagine if that got more and more complicated. Well, field programmable gate arrays have gotten bigger and bigger and had more gates.
Okay.
So they could physically emulate bigger and bigger circuits.
Okay.
Eventually, these FPGAs got big enough that they could encapsulate the entire structure of a fairly complicated system, like a Nintendo. Or in the case of the Analogue Pocket, the Game Boy Advance,
And this
the
thing
Game
does
Boy
a lot
Color.
of things, yeah.
It does that.
Yeah. Doesn't this also do like TurboGrafx
So
or something?
you can get cartridges. They look like super high tech, Apple Game Genies.
Right.
Like super nice. You could plug them into this here and be like, oh, now I can play Game Gear. Now I can play Atari Lynx.
Right.
Why?
It's crazy that it plays Lynx.
Because, like in the case of this, by the way, this is a AGS 101.
That's what
Game
I
Boy
had,
Advance.
yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
This sits next to my bed.
Yeah.
And I have a big box of Game Boy games, and I throw them in this, and I play them.
I played Metroid Fusion originally on this, and not long ago, I still own one of these. I was playing Advance Wars on this,
cool.
Advance Wars 1 and 2, and I know we're on this whole subject, but I love the SP. It's just such a
wonderful.
nice
Yeah.
little system. And the one that had the two two screens on the top and bottom. That's the
DS,
The DS. I always wish on the DS that they'd release a Baby Pac-Man, because Baby Pac-Man was pinball.
Yeah.
And it was the game, so that they could do both.
Oh, that'd be cool.
But I guess we're past the days of the DS, so forget it.
So right now, I have that and I love it. But this screen has 10 times the resolution.
Mm-hmm.
This can also, with the adapters, play Game Gear, play Lynx,
which is really cool.
Play Neo Geo Pocket, all of that. I'm like, what is it going to take to beat this?
I got to mention another thing about this before, because I want to make sure we talk about it. So there's also a thing called the DAC.
Yes.
And so you guys know that I am not so much of a handheld gamer. When I play Game Boy, I like to play on a television, because why would I want to play on a smaller screen? Even though this is a nice big screen for a handheld, can't compare to a television. So the DAC.
So let's go through how you can do it.
Okay.
So the Analogue Pocket can plug into a dock.
The dock first.
The dock has HDMI.
Mm-hmm.
It also has USB. It also has Bluetooth and 2.4 gigahertz wireless, so it can use controllers like the 8-bit do. So you could take the Analogue Pocket, plug it into the dock, plug the HDMI cable into your modern TV, and play all the games that this can play.
If you want to do that.
On that.
But I want to play on a CRT.
You want to play on a CRT.
So the way I do it, just so you know, I mean, my CRT has component, but because I have so many different systems and whatever, I have a thing called the G-Comp.
Yes.
And the G-Comp essentially is a component hub, and it's got a bunch of different plugs that you can plug in component stuff. So I would want to go, what I'd like to do is go from that DAC to the component switcher to my TV, and then that also goes out to my retro tank, and the retro tank goes out to my computer.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
So and I'm curious, so I'm curious if the DAC has a pass-through where you wouldn't need the retro tank. I don't know. Like where you could do both at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have it here.
Yeah.
They sent this. I bought the dock and the DAC, but they haven't shipped them yet. So, this is what we have right now.
Right.
What's cool about the DAC then is that you can take your digital signal from either this or the Mega SG or the Super NT.
So that DAC doesn't only work with this.
No.
You can also use it with all the other stuff.
It has an HDMI port.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Right? And HDMI is a digital format.
Mm-hmm.
And component and all those are analog
Sure.
formats. So DAC stands for digital to analog converter.
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
So I think, people are always going to want to have the original retro systems.
Mm-hmm.
But when I learned about FPGAs and I learned that my handheld or my console could reconfigure itself to be as close to an Atari Lynx or a Game Boy or a Game Gear as is reasonably possible. Not emulation, but literally electrically.
Yeah.
At the circuitry level.
Right.
This device could reconfigure itself to be all of those things.
Right.
I'm like, this is amazing technology.
So I just want to clear one thing, just so really I can just say this. So that DAC, the fact that exists for all these systems now, really fixes everything I had said all those years and all those videos for the last 5 years or whatever that we've been doing those mini console videos. The fact that now you can plug any of these things into the DAC, and then you can go out of that and do component or whatever other things it does, probably RGB.
Component, RGB, S-video, composite.
It does all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that fixes all my problems. All those videos we ever did, and I was always like, this is cool, but I want to play on my CRT. Well, guess what? Now I can. They fixed it. That's a big deal. That changes all those videos.
That's great. Now, another thing about it is the classic consoles, and I know the classic consoles don't support things like save states. Don't support.
That's not true. Well,
like
the consoles.
like a Super Nintendo can't do a save state. It can with an EverDrive.
I mean, well, that's what I mean. If you have the Sega Genesis EverDrive, you can make a save state.
You can.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
With this, it has all of those modern features built in.
Yeah.
Like a save state.
I see what you mean. You meant like a Sega Genesis system can't do a save state. You need the EverDrive to do it. That's what. Okay. Yeah.
Right. There are little things like if I have an NES and I want to listen to the Famicom audio in like Castlevania 3 or something like that, I can't do that. If I want to play a Famicom Disk System game on my Nintendo,
I mean, if you have a Famicom,
well, now I also need a Famicom.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, so how can you simplify your life? How can I not need to have all of these extra things?
Sure.
How can I have a thing where it doesn't need new capacitors because it's not 30 years old? How can I have a thing where I can have wireless controllers because now I have an 80-inch TV and I'm 20 feet back because I have this gigantic TV. How can I do that?
Sure.
How can I not carry a CRT up 10 flights of stairs to my apartment? How can I not have it's purpley in the corner because it's 30 years old?
By the way, another thing about the CRTs is, so I've been talking about plugging all the stuff in with component. Because let me tell you, you do get it set up. If you do the work and you do get it set up, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
But and I had talked a lot about, people leave, their CRTs out on the curb. They do. But usually
it's not the good one.
It's not the good one. Like if you want like a fucking Sony Trinitron or like one of the higher end, like really good TVs, you're probably going to have to pay somebody for it. You might have to do like Craigslist or who knows what.
I mean, I've been buying for too many games for the convention. I've been buying Commodore 64 monitors for $200 a pop.
And I love the look of the Commodore 64 monitors, but even those aren't.
They're not the best. They're not the best, but
they're
they
cool.
support.
They're cool though.
They support S-Video, which isn't nothing.
Man, so the Commodore 64 one, it's the way I think of that, it's almost like a different flavor.
Yeah.
It's like, I love those fucking monitors and I love playing like NES games on those monitors. It's not like the perfect ideal way to do it, but man, it's got its own little look to it and I love that shit.
Yeah, I mean, if I need to, and what I love about them is they stack. If I need to have 20 of them,
you can stack them all
on a pallet.
It's easy to do.
If I have a bunch of all different CRTs that are different sizes and all that, where's it going to go?
Yeah.
So I want to get back to this.
Yeah.
FPGAs, when the first Analog came out, people knew about them, but it wasn't in the mainstream.
Yeah.
With things like the Mr. Project, which
I'm building right now.
You're building something. FPGAs are here to stay. And they give a great experience. Analog has built all these cool things that make it so that you don't need to know about all the Mr. stuff, all this like tech details to get where you want to go.
That Mr., it is very much like a hobbyist thing.
Yeah.
Like when I got, involved in that, I'm like putting it together. I didn't realize how much of a, I got to get this little thing and that little thing because I'm like putting it together from scratch. Where you can have them pre-built, but I'm like ordering the different pieces and doing it myself, which I'm kind of glad that I'm doing that as opposed to just ordering a pre-built one because now I like understand it.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of better. But anyway.
The other thing I like about the Analogue Pocket is so now I have this great tool. I have this FPGA, I have the modern software, I have the save states, I have an SD card slot, I support all these systems, I do that. Well, what else can I do? Well, what do people use Game Boys for? They use them for music creation. And because it's not emulation, well, we could probably simulate the audio hardware on the Game Boy really well. Well, this comes with software called Nanoloop, which allows people to make, chiptune style music directly on it. And it comes with it built in.
That's cool.
And the output on it can also do MIDI output, so they can output it to their computer, to a controller, to do more advanced music stuff.
Okay.
That means that this is in ways superior to like the DMG Game Boy that you see people use at like concerts and things like that.
Sure.
Which I think is really cool. So it's also a synthesizer.
And I saw they are also letting people like develop for it too.
So there's also a piece of software called GB Studio, which you can download and which is packed in this as well, which will allow people to make Game Boy games for the analog in a portable file format. So now people are going to make new games that leverage this.
Yeah.
The other thing they did was, we have the FPGA on here for the Game Boy. They included a second FPGA chip on the board of this so people can make cores for other systems.
So here's my wish for this thing. I think this is really cool. I probably would end up buying one of these actually.
Yeah.
I think this is great, all the different things it can do. My one little gripe is, so you take this and you stick it into the dock.
Yes.
Now, you see, this is the analog. You could plug real NES controllers into this. So if I want to play this on my TV, I want to be able to take this controller. I want to be able to take this Analogue Pocket, plug it into the dock, and then it's got the DAC, and then it's hooked into my, CRT and all that. That's all great, but I want a way to be able to use a controller with it that isn't a wireless 8-bit DOE controller. I want to be able to use a real controller.
Here's a question. So here's the thing.
Like with some kind of adapter or something.
The dock
Yeah.
has multiple USB ports on it.
So I could do like a SNES
there
USB controller.
There are dongles that
Which
you
I
can
own.
get.
I own.
Which have a Super Nintendo port on them or a Nintendo port
Yeah.
on them.
So I could use the adapter, and I say,
If it supports the controller, which it probably does. We don't have the dock yet, so we don't know.
right.
It may do that.
So there probably already is a way to do it. Just
Yeah.
like USB to SNES and then plug a real SNES in.
Yes.
So it's probably possible. We haven't actually done it.
Probably possible.
Probably possible.
But, worst case scenario, there is some list of hardware controllers with USB ports on them that will work in it. So you don't have to be wireless.
But just one more little thing is that because of the fact that these are so nice and that you can just plug stuff into them, it would be nice if Analog had an additional device.
Like an attractively looking one that...
Like a nice one, and then you could plug it into it with USB. I guess that you plug it into the dock with USB, and then it has like the Genesis, Super Nintendo, all the different things, so you can plug the different controllers in some kind of like controller adapter thing.
Yeah.
It'd be a nice little product.
It would be cool.
So that's my suggestion.
The other thing is, the graphics modes on this are more than just color palette swaps. And I want to mention that because it has a 1600 by 1440 display, like when you put it in the Game Boy mode or the Game Boy Light mode or the Game Boy Pocket mode, like it has the scan line. It looks like the screen did.
Yeah.
Because this screen is so much higher resolution.
Yeah.
That it can have the imperfections of the screen. You can get it clean too, but it can have the imperfections. So being able with the dock to capture authentic looking Game Boy footage on this is not something we have even with like the Game Boy player or it's like, okay, I want to capture for, let's say we're doing a video project. We want to capture Game Boy footage that looks like it came out of a regular fat Game Boy.
Yeah.
We can do that with this.
That's cool.
Which is cool. Oh, and it's got a link cable in the bottom.
Which, I didn't use the link cable often, but the link cable I used for Link, I used it for Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, because the only way you can fight Ganon in that is to beat both games and then like link them together.
Right.
So that's cool that it has that. I think that's the same thing I'm talking about. And did you ever use that for anything? What would you use it for?
Pokemon.
See, I wasn't a Pokemon kid.
Yeah. No. Like when I was a kid, I had Red and Blue.
Yeah.
You have Red and Blue. It's like, oh, I want Eakins. Oh, I want the different ones have the different Pokemon.
Yeah.
You had to trade.
Okay.
So also F1 Race.
Okay.
So F1 Race has the quad multi-tap, like the 4-player.
That's cool. I don't know about that. We should try that sometime.
Four player Game Boy is where it's at. It's pretty neat.
Ryan, for the first time, had introduced me to, was it 8 or 10? 8-player Saturn Bomberman.
Yeah.
Remember when we did that?
Oh, wasn't that cool?
And you got all the fucking things, right?
Yeah.
All those like
you need
attachments.
You need 2 Saturn.
Do you still have all those?
I do. You know what? I forgot.
Don't get rid of all that.
I forgot about a lot of my like game collection.
Yeah.
And I go in my basement.
I gotta say something. Once in a while, Ryan goes to me. He's like, "Yo, Mike, I think I'm gonna sell all my games." Don't sell your fucking games.
Okay.
Don't sell your games, because you're gonna regret it. You'll regret it.
I probably will. I was going through my basement and I opened up a tote. I'm like, oh wow, I have Mutant League Hockey. Oh wow, I have, and I'm like sending people pictures of all these games that I had.
Don't do it. You might get in a mood like I wants to be like, fuck, I don't need this shit. But you know what? In a year, 3 years, you'll be like, I wish I had it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Put it in a storage unit for a while if you need to.
Yeah.
But don't get rid of them.
Yeah, well, all my NES games and Super Nintendo games are here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? I do that too. Sometimes I look at my games. I'm like, I don't play those, but I will.
Yeah.
I have to remember that I will.
Right.
Like, you know.
Yeah. So, I was excited about this. I was happy that they decided they remembered us and they sent one over.
I got to ask you a question. So, so you said all those things, but I have not come to terms with this yet. So, electrons move through reality. I still don't understand what that means. Everything you said, I think I understand what you said, but what does that exactly mean?
So when you emulate something, the everything's happening in the software. It has no relationship to the physical structure of the chip. So it has no relationship to the path that the electricity flows through the piece of hardware.
Okay.
And there are physical effects that come from distance. Like you'll see modern high performance motherboards. Mm-hmm. You'll notice that they're moving the RAM slots closer to the chip. Mm-hmm. They're moving the RAM slots closer to the chip because of the speed of light.
Okay.
Right? Because the memory is that much faster because it's that much closer to the chip.
Okay.
So now the reality, the rules of physics.
When you say reality, do you mean
like physics?
Do you mean the electrons are moving through the air?
They move, the rules of physics apply. That's what it means. What I meant by that is the rules of physics apply.
Okay.
So this isn't a logic puzzle. This isn't something that's happening in our mind. Mm-hmm. This isn't something that's happening in software. This isn't something that's happening at this higher level.
Okay.
This is something that's happening down at the bare metal, down at the actual like electrical engineering.
Okay.
So the FPGA, when those gates program themselves, it's actually a physical activity. It's the path that the energy takes through the chip is actually changing.
Right.
So it's way more like a Nintendo to it. It's at a physical level.
Right.
It's not at a software level where your computer is pretending to be an NES.
Right.
There's a program running on your computer. What your chip is actually doing is entirely different than what a Nintendo would do. Mm-hmm. In the case of an FPGA, it's way closer to that because it's actually a programmable circuit versus software that's running. Your computer is when it's emulating something, it's this clock cycle. It's running, but it's checking your email. It's refreshing the screen. It's doing all these things. And granted, it's doing it orders of magnitude faster than NES can, right? Mm-hmm. But it's still not exactly the same.
Now, when people took that comment and they sort of ran with it, what do you think somebody's problem with that comment would be? Looking at it from an outside perspective, they hear somebody say that And why would when you said that to me, I was just listening and I was just like, okay, I don't quite understand the tech stuff to the degree that you do, but
Right.
I didn't think of that statement and be like,
What an
it meant
idiot! What an idiot!
It didn't mean
Why
anything.
why would he possibly
So
say that?
So it's interesting to me that there was several people in the YouTube comments or whatever be like, "Ha, the electrons move through reality, right, Ryan?" I wonder why that was such a thing.
Well,
What do you think?
I think it's a combination of things. I think number one, there are many of the people in the comments are happy with emulation. Emulation is enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think many of the people in the comments didn't understand the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, that's fine. Didn't understand why it was better or could be perceived as better. I think a number of people in the comments felt like it was too expensive. Mm-hmm. It's a luxury item. This is a luxury item,
and so is this. It's very
it's
expensive.
a luxury item. It's very expensive. It's not fair or for everyone. Yeah, and that could make you feel bad. We were lucky we got sent one, but
and this is mine and I was sent that. Yeah.
it's a big decision to buy something like that.
Absolutely. I think this at that time was $500. I don't know what it is now.
Yeah.
That's a big purchase.
Makes sense.
Right.
I think a lot of people, weren't expecting that kind of video. Maybe.
Right.
They want maybe a different kind of video.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of reasons why I think that happened. But when I heard that, I was like, this is something I want to revisit because I think there's a lot of value in FPGAs. I think as they become more mainstream and as people understand them more, they'll be like, this is how I want to play games when I'm not using original hardware. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's why I felt so strongly about it, because I wanted people to understand the nerdy tech. It's like, no, this is different than emulation. And look at all the emulation problems we've had. Look at Switch Online.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, Switch Online isn't giving me what I want. Oh, the @Games Genesis isn't giving me what I want.
Right.
Oh, this emulator or that emulator, the PlayStation Classic isn't giving me what I want.
And the EverDrives that I own, which are FPGA, have given me what I wanted. I stream with them all the time, almost every day, and I can't think of a problem I've had with it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Wait, so now the EverDrives have FPGA in them as well? Oh, I guess because it has to emulate the mappers. That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, I believe they all work FPGA.
That makes sense.
I think.
Because they have to have... Because the cartridge itself has multiple...
And what happens is I own pretty much all those games physically.
Yeah.
But... a lot of times I'll do streams where I'm playing a lot of different things, and it's like if I'm going to play 40 different games, and I've done that too, but then you have to have the big stack of games, and it gets
You're swapping them.
It's a mess, and then you have
Q-tips,
cleaning them. I have the Genesis cartridge. I stick that in, and it's a SD card. You just have all the games. You load it up instantly, and it's just really quick and really good, and it's been a big convenience to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, as far as the game goes, for me, it's played the same. Like, I can play Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on it and not notice a difference. I
remember the first time I beat Castlevania. And this is where the FPGA thing really comes in. The first time I beat Castlevania, you were like, hey, Ryan, you should try out the original Castlevania again. Mm-hmm. You said that to me. And I said, okay, I'll check it out. And my NES... I was having trouble with the pins or something. It wasn't going. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to play on this retro bit. Mm. So I went to the flea market. I got the retro bit.
I definitely didn't mean for you to do that.
No, I stuck Castlevania in.
Yeah.
Now, retro bit, it's not emulation. It's Nintendo on a chip. So it's like a Nintendo, but it's not accurate. And there are a few things. Mm-hmm. The colors are a little duller. The music sounds a little different. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know this at the time. the game was running a little faster. So and I managed to beat Castlevania that day. The first time I beat Castlevania 1, I was playing it on hard mode because it was a little faster.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's not what you want.
Especially not your first time.
Right?
Right, yeah.
No, it'd be cool to have like a mode or so. Oh, it's faster now.
Right, yeah, sure.
But I played it on that and I was like, And then I played it again on a real NES one day and I'm like, wow, this hallway with these knights and the Medusas is easy.
Right, because it's going slower.
It's going slower. Right? I'm like, man, this was, the Grim Reaper at 10% faster is like, it's a problem.
Right, sure.
Right?
Sure, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that was the first time where I'm like, yo, I really need to like find like a real thing.
Yeah.
You know?
So I like to mention, so we're talking a lot about FPGA here, but with like actual emulation, that's when you know, at least for me, in my experience, you know, you deal with lag, where the FPGA, you know, I haven't really, you know, dealt with lag. But that said, obviously nobody wants the lag, but I do want to throw out that like I also don't have a problem with emulation. I think there's definitely a lot of good uses for emulation, especially in terms of, you know, the, you know, just like the history of games and being able to preserve games. And also, you know, you can go online, you can just get any game and just play them. You know, that's what people will say. They'll be like, oh, nice fucking $500 system. I got all these games for nothing, right?
Right.
So I know that. But what's really nice about emulation is that let's say you really like a game, or let's say that you're younger and you didn't actually grow up with these games, but you're interested and you're like, I want to try these games out, but you might not want to spend the money. So you could go online, you could play some of these games for free and try them out. And what if you fall in love with one of these games and be like, oh shit, I had never played Mega Man 2 before. You know, you're a 22-year-old kid or whatever, and you play it on your PC and you're like, this is awesome, and you love it. And then you're like, it'd be cool to own the real thing. And maybe from there you go and you get the real thing or whatever. Like there's a lot of good reasons and a lot of good things about emulation. And I've had the stigma of that people think that I hate emulation, and I really don't. It's one of those things where it's just somebody hears you say one off the cuff comment,
right?
Like Electrons through reality,
right? When
really there's a lot more context that isn't there.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of situations where there's a game like Lil Samson or Fire and Ice or something like that, where that game is $1,000, $2,000,
super expensive,
whatever. Ridiculously priced, and it's like, I want to play that. I want to understand it, right? And you don't have the benefit. You were born in 2016. You know, right. It's like, how do I experience that? It's like, well, you go to the website, you download it, you play it,
right?
And if you like it, you know, maybe you'll own that someday. Maybe you won't, but you know, you had a chance to play it that you otherwise wouldn't have had.
And I think everybody should have the chance to play it.
Absolutely.
You know,
the other thing about emulation, I just want to say, and where the FPGA kind of like blurs the line, is I've been doing NES programming lately. Mm-hmm. You know, by the time this episode comes out, we would have announced AVGN 8-bit, which I'm not working on the programming of, but I'm working on. And I've been working on building this Mega Man speedrun thing. I've been working on building a Tetris score attack mode. I've been working on different things with programming, with the emulators, with the scripting in the emulators. And I can't script a Super Nintendo, right? My Super Nintendo can't call.
I heard that the Super Nintendo is really difficult to like program for.
I can't take my Super Nintendo and update a web server with my score.
No, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
But with emulation and with
like a leaderboard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now imagine if you went to a convention and you could go to you could play with a USB Nintendo controller, get your Tetris high score, and have it immediately broadcast to a website, immediately broadcast to a big projector somewhere.
Okay.
Right? and somebody didn't have to sit
Because like
there.
if you had a real Nintendo and an actual copy of Dr. Mario or something, and you got a score, it's like you'd have to yell, "Hey Johnny, my score is this." But if you had a leaderboard, you can't do that kind of stuff on an NES or an Atari.
You
or
can.
anything. Yeah.
Or imagine if you wanted to just fight the bosses. Or you wanted to have a moon jump challenge where you jump really high, or you wanted to have a no jump challenge or a no death challenge, or there's a million things that you wanted to do.
Okay.
You want to take a game that you know very well.
Yeah.
And mess
Do
around
something
with
particular
it.
with
Do
it.
something cool with it. And then you wanted to talk to other computers and things like that. Well, emulation lets us do that. So that's where emulation is really cool for me. It's also a great learning tool. I learned so much about the NES and how the memory is structured and how the controller works and how the PPU works and how the sound works, because I could sit on my computer in a situation where I'm not going to break my vintage, they're like $100 now. I'm not going to break my expensive NES.
Yeah.
I'm not going to break my cartridge. I'm not going to do something. I can hit F5 and refresh super fast and have different tools. And it's like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And then, we're working on AVG and 8-bit and somebody sends me a build. They didn't have to send me a cartridge in the mail.
You know what? And by the way, another thing I just fucking thought of is the fact that the actual physical games that they'll die, apparently, from what I know, they'll the boards and stuff will die one day.
Right.
Well, what if, 60 years from now, however long, all those boards die? What are all these games just not going to exist? Well, with emulation, these games will exist.
And the other thing, but by the same token, eventually we'll live in a world where you could take the old ROM, the old emulated ROM, and put it on a cartridge.
And put it on a cartridge, yeah.
Or you could take the ROM and use a device, not this device because this plays cartridges, but you could take a ROM and put it on an EverDrive and play it on the original hardware long after the cartridges were lost.
Which is what I'm already doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great.
So the fact that exists means... So I have all the real cartridges.
Yeah.
Like I have all the NES games, but when they're sitting on my shelf right now, and when they die, I've already got the replacement. But if that technology wasn't there,
you wouldn't have it.
We would lose all these great games. All this stuff that I love, Zelda and Castlevania and all this stuff, it would be gone. So for anybody to think that I don't like emulation or FPGA or any of this stuff, it's like I love all this stuff.
It's cool.
And I'm
having a blast. I'm having a blast with the FPGA stuff. I'm having a blast programming. I mean, I've been sending you messages. I'm like, oh, look what I did with Castlevania 3.
I want to say, yeah.
Yeah,
He's
so
working on it.
I'm working on it. So we'll show that to you, when it's done. But you'll probably get to play it at too many games or something like that.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So that's it. I think that finally wraps up my thoughts on all these mini consoles. I'm glad to sort of, I feel like I've finally, I've sort of closed the chapter, and who knew, back then that the development of that DAC, would have, fixed all my concerns, and I'm happy that it did. And, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to try. My take home from this is, this sits next to my bed. I'm going to try the Analogue Pocket for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm my AGS
I want to see that
101
dock and everything when it comes in.
is going to go away. I'm going to mess with the dock. I'm going to mess with the DAC, and it should be a good time. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Talk About Games. Make sure to like it, subscribe, check out our other videos, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.